Before I begin, I just want to make an announcement for some people connecting online. You can type your question at any point during the presentation, but I'll address them at the end. Okay, and before I move on, I just want to announce the next webinar. The next webinar here at ONA will be on November the 12th with our postdoctoral associate Martha Coleman, and she will talk about the ALTAR project and assessing the effects of prescribed fire frequency in association with chopping on sustainability of southern Florida rangelands. So make sure to register for that next webinar next month. So what I want to do today is to talk a little bit about pre-calving nutrition and show you some of the studies that we have done since 2017. Before I start, also, I just want to thank all the staff and the students for those studies. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of time, as you guys will see. So I really appreciate all their help. We had to bring those animals several times. And also, we have to tag those animals at birth and collect the blood samples on pasture and birth weight. So I really appreciate all your help to make this happen, okay? So why did we choose to work on this area? And that's because pre-calving nutrition can affect several sectors of the beef industry, as I'm gonna show you in a minute. And also the major reason is we have to double the amount of beef produced in the next few years by almost 70 million tons of beef production. Have to double by 2050. And 70% of that production will come from tropical and subtropical environments, where the majority of the herd in those areas are from Boston-Nicus cattle, or cattle that has some level of genetic Boston-Nicus genetics, right? So, which is Southeast United States, Brazil, and Australia, for example. So a lot of the production has to come from those areas. And that's for when we look at the amount of studies done with fetal programming and pre-calving nutrition, the amount of studies that use this type of cattle are minimal compared to its importance. Most of the studies were done in Midwest United States, and they don't represent exactly what's going to happen in those regions. All right, so therefore we start working on those studies. It takes a long time, as you guys will see, and right now we have almost 100% of the data that we started in 2017. Okay, so as I told you at the beginning, pre-calving nutrition can affect several factors of the beef industry. One of them is reproduction of the mature cows. We have to use pre-calving nutrition to make sure that they calve in good condition. And then as you have the greater body condition score at calving, you increase pregnancy rates, right, in the subsequent breeding season. This is very consistent among studies, among locations, and among breeds. So I'm not going to spend much time on this. Body condition score at calving also determines when that pregnancy will happen. Right, the greater the body condition score at calving, the sooner this cow will resume estrus, she will ovulate, and she will be able to breed. And a cow that breeds early, she will also calve early, which means that the calf will be older and heavier at weaning. So we want to make sure that we have the greatest amount of cows cycling in the beginning of breeding season, just to make sure that we have more cows pregnant and the early as possible. And then lately, there's some focus on this fetal programming, right? That by changing the nutrition during pregnancy, you can change how the calf develops during gestation to the point that you might affect the health as well as the reproductive performance of the heifers and then the carcass quality of the steers. So for example, this is just to show you the growth of that calf during gestation. You have the first, the second, and the third trimester. So 2/3 of that growth during gestation happens during the last 3 months, right? Also during that time, you had the formation of all the muscle and adipose tissue. So muscle fibers start to form during the second trimester and then continue until calving. Whereas all the adipose tissue, the cells, for example, that will be responsible for marbling, they start to form during the last 3 months of gestation. All right, so we have a lot of potential to affect not only the growth, as well as the carcass quality of those steers. So as I told you, most of the studies were done in the Midwest of the United States. So these are some of the examples. We have 3 studies that they looked at supplementing cows before calving. And in all of them, we see an increase in weaning weights if those steers were born from cows that received supplementation. You see greater heavier carcass weights, greater percentage of carcasses grading choice, and also increased marbling scores. And there's also indication that not only growth, but it may also affect the health of those steers. So steers that were born from cows that received supplementation, 10 times less calves became sick in a feedlot because of that regime. right? So there's a lot of potential. Unfortunately, not a lot of studies done with our type of cattle in our type of environment. So this is one example of a cow here in Florida calving at the end of October. Okay, the cow is about 1,100 pounds and she's producing 16 pounds of milk at the peak of lactation. So it's easy to see that right after calving, those cows lose condition really fast, right? That's because their requirements is much greater than what's available on the grass or what she's able to eat in a single day. Starting in the spring and then in summer, the amount of protein and energy that you have on the grass is higher than her requirements. So those cows will recover a lot of that body condition score. But look at the end, about October. That's roughly 45 to 60 days before they calve. We start to see a dramatic increase on their requirements, and that's because of the calf growth happening in the last 3 months. And it's usually above what the grass is available. So you have plenty of grass, but the amount of protein and energy is not enough for those cows at that stage. So they start losing condition right at the end of the calving season, right before calving season. It's hard to see it because by the time you realize it, they already start calving, right? Unless you are collecting body condition score frequently, you won't be able to see this loss. It's easier to see after they calve, right? So then they start losing really fast. And there are indications that just this loss here, this subtle restriction of energy during the last 45 days is enough to affect the health of the calf in the future months. Okay, so starting 2017, as I told you, we began a series of studies. We actually did 4, but I'm only going to have time to show you 3. All right, so the first one is looking at the timing of supplementation. The second one is pre-partum supplementation with or without methionine, which I'll explain in a minute. And the third one is about the year-round supplementation, which a lot of people are doing in the state of Florida. Okay, so the first one, this one is a very simple design. Here you have the requirements of these cows in terms of energy, and those cows are calving about October or November. So we had one group that did not receive any supplementation before calving. That's what most people do, and that's what we usually do here at the station as well. And then we added a treatment that they receive about 2.25 pounds of dry distillers grains for the last 12 weeks before calving. Very simple, very similar to the ones that I just showed you at the beginning. And then we decided to add a third treatment that instead of providing 2.25 for 12 weeks, we provided 4.5 for the first 6 weeks. So the total amount is exactly the same, but we're just concentrating all of that supplementation during the first 6 weeks. The reason for that is because this is the time that their requirements are the lowest. So with the same amount of supplement, we're providing all of that during a time that our requirements are least. So the hypothesis was that they're going to put more body condition score with the same amount of supplement. And I'm also cutting labor by half. All right, so what will be the impact of doing that in terms of cow performance and the calf performance? So we did that study for 2 years. This is the body condition score of those cows. The study began in August, and those cows start calving around November. Okay, so the blue line is the control that never got any supplementation before calving. The orange line is the ones that were supplemented for all 12 weeks. And the green line is the ones that were supplemented only the first 6 weeks of the study. And as we hypothesized, and of course, those cows that received supplementation, they had much greater body condition score at calving compared to the control. And we did have the best results when we offered all that supplement during the first 6 weeks. So it worked. We reduced labor by half, and we got the best results on body condition score. Now look at the control here, the last 45 days that I told you that they start losing. It's just about a quarter of body condition score, but then you can, if you're not measuring that every month, you will not be able to detect this. After calving, everybody's treated exactly the same. Everybody received molasses for the whole winter time. And then those ones that received supplementation, they were able to maintain this greater condition score all the way to the preg check. Right, so it worked. Everything was working fine. But when we look at pregnancy rates, we don't see any difference. And the reason for that is just look at the control. They started the study in a condition almost 5.5. Even though they lost, they still calve at around 5, which is what we want. And after calving, they did not lose in average more than half of a point. So as long as those cows are calving in good condition and you minimize how much they're losing after calving, they're going to be fine. So the need of supplementation in this study was minimal. right? So you get upset because of that, because you expected to see difference, which would help pay for that cost, but it's actually a good thing, and I'm going to explain in a minute why we had this scenario. So we're evaluating a pre-calving strategy in a scenario that the cows did not need supplementation, and I'll show you if that pays off or not. Right? But even though we had no differences in pregnancy rates, we did see some changes on calving distribution. So the cows that received supplementation during the first 6 weeks, they start calving earlier. Right, so we started the study in August, they calved in November, breeding season started in January all the way to March. Then we checked in May, and I told you there was no differences in pregnancy rates. Then they calved for the second time. Right, this is the second calf crop, and those that were supplemented for 6 weeks, they start calving early, which means that their calves will be older and heavier at the time of weaning. And this significantly helps to pay for the cost of supplementation. All right. Now, and the reason for that is because they had the greatest condition score at calving. So what about the performance of the calves? One of the concerns that people have with supplementation is that when you provide supplementation before calving, you're going to increase the growth of those calves during gestation. You might have problems at birth. All right, so we did see that when you provide supplementation, they were heavier at birth compared to those born from cows that never received, about 3 pounds heavier. But it did not change the percentage of calves live at birth. So that increase did not hurt the calving difficulty of those cows, right? It might be a problem if you're already having calving difficulty in your operation. But if you're not, and you're using the right bulls, this extra birth weight is not going to be a problem, right? Now, what happened to their pre-weaning growth? At the time of weaning, when they're 9 months of age, those calves that were born from cows that received supplementation, they were heavier than the control. And the best results was when they were born from cows that received supplementation for the entire late gestation. 30 pounds heavier compared to the control, and about 13 if they were offered just the first 6 weeks. So what that shows you is that the best strategy for the mom was not the best for the calf, right? The best for the mom was when I provided all the supplementation the first 6 weeks, reduced labor, and I got the best results in body condition, and they start calving early. But for the calf growth, I had the best when I provided for the entire late gestation. Okay. Now, after year 1, we sent those steers to the feedlot. We sent them last year in July, and they were harvested in March of this year. This year, they were running this year 2, so we sent it in July. They're going to be harvested in March of next year. So I only have the data for year 1 to show you for the rest, for this study here. So if this have the same responses next year, we will reach statistical significance in those values here that I'm showing you. And it seems that those calves born from cows that receive supplementation, they have better response to the vaccination. Does that mean that they are healthier? May or may not, okay? What's the problem with having better vaccine response? It's hard to add a value to that unless you're running into problems. So having better vaccine response is not going to increase their performance if they don't become sick. But if you expose them to the disease and they don't become sick because they have a better vaccine response, then it pays off. All right, so having a better health is pretty much like an insurance. You feel like you're spending money with something that is not going to affect your performance until the day that you actually need it, right? So it's hard to estimate a value, but this, for a feedlot producer, it's huge, right? Having less chicks become sick during the receiving period. What about the performance in the feedlot? We don't see much of a difference in how much they ate, how much they gained, or how much was their feed efficiency throughout the entire feedlot period. But we did see that the calves born from cows that receive supplementation, more carcasses graded choice, less carcasses graded low choice. Right, this is easy to add a value. I can just estimate what's the premium for a choice compared to a low choice and see if that pays off. Once I have the second year data, I'll be able to run several scenarios for somebody that is selling the calf at weaning, somebody that's retaining ownership all the way to the end. Okay, so for that, I'm going to show you one scenario that for somebody that is selling all the calves at the time of weaning. There's 2 ways you're going to pay for that extra cost of pre-calving supplementation: increasing pregnancy rates or increasing the weaning weights of those calves. I showed you that we did not increase pregnancy rates. So the only way that we're going to pay for it in this study is by the extra weaning weights of those calves. So this is what we have so far, right? This is just rough calculations to show you the point of the whole study. Now, labor, it's about half for those that were supplemented during the first 6 weeks per count. Supplementation cost is the same because I offer the same total amount. So the total supplementation cost, labor plus the feed, it's slightly less for those cows that were supplemented in the first 6 weeks. But look at the additional weaning weight compared to the control. 30 pounds extra compared to 13. So if you do the return, you're actually making $15 more per cow if you do the whole trimester gestation, supplement for the whole trimester, compared to this one you offer just for 6 weeks. You increase their performance, but not enough to pay for that. So by trying to save $250 here in time, I lost this per cow. Right? So that's the whole goal of all the studies that we're trying to look at, because most of the time people focus on the performance of the cow only, but now we have some evidence that maybe the calf should also be placed into this count. All right, this is really interesting. And then the other thing I want to mention to you is that this is the most conservative scenario that can happen, and I was still able to make it work. If you do have a problem with cows calving thinner than what they did, then you would have differences on pregnancy rates, and the difference on weaning performance of those calves will be much greater than what I'm showing you right now. So the income will be greater than what I'm showing. So it was actually a good thing that we did not have any differences on pregnancy rates, because even in that case, we still make it work. All right. Now, the second study one I want to show you is with our replacement beef heifers. So those are heifers that they get bred as yearlings, and they're going to calve the first time as 2-year-olds. Usually we don't provide any supplementation before calving for those cows, right? Only after they calve when their requirements are really high. So what we did in this study, we had a group that don't receive any supplementation before calving, a second group that received about 2.2 pounds of molasses with urea, and a third one that we provided also the same level of supplementation with molasses, added with methionine. Methionine is an essential amino acid that is usually deficient in animals that are growing on grazing situations, okay? So we wanted to address this deficiency of this particular amino acid to see the performance of the cows, right? This amino acid also has some indication that it changes the epigenetics of the offspring. But it means that this amino acid provides some substrates. It becomes a precursor of forgot the word I want to say right now. It becomes a precursor that causes DNA methylation. So what it does, it adds to the DNA, and it can turn on and turn off gene expression of the calf that will be born, okay? So by addressing this deficiency during pregnancy, are we going to cause something on the calves as well? So those treatments that were offered for about 56 days before they calved, and we continue for about 14 days after calving, right? Once everybody calved, all of the cows received about 3.5 pounds of molasses all the way into the end of the breeding season. All right. Now, something that we do with our first calf cows at ONA is that we early wean their calves on the first day of the breeding season. This is because when we do that, we increase their pregnancy rates by almost 30% compared to those first calf cows that remain with their calves. This strategy also allowed me to control 100% of the diet of that calf. So what we did, we put them in a dry lot, and we offer a high concentrate diet at 3% of their body weight, almost as much as they can eat in a single day. So we really wanted to push those calves to gain as much as they could to see if how we fed their mothers is going to affect their performance after birth, okay? And then during that time, we also vaccinated those calves twice to really challenge their immune system and look at their immune response. So what we seen was, in terms of count performance, something else that I want to mention to you is that this study, the whole goal, the major goal for that study is to look at the performance of the calves, not much of the counts. That's why the number of heifers in this study was very small. The number is enough. It's about 36 heifers per year. It's enough to look at growth, body condition, and the growth of the calves, but it's definitely not enough for pregnancy rates. All right, so but what we see was those cows that received supplementation, they were about 0.5 point greater in body condition at the time of calving compared to the control. No benefit of adding methionine. And when we look at pregnancy rates, there's no statistical difference, and the reason is just because we didn't have enough animals. But numerically, it happened what you would expect. If we had twice of the heifers in this study, then this would become significant. Okay. Now, but for that, just for the sake of the rest of the discussion, just imagine that we had absolutely no differences. Okay, pregnancy rates were the same. I'm again having a very conservative scenario. Now, what happened to the performance of the calves? During the dry lot, the ones that were born from cows that received supplementation, they had greater average daily gain. Remember, this time here, everybody was fed exactly the same percentage of their body weight. And they also had greater average daily gain from birth all the way to the exit of the dry lot. And no effects of adding methionine. The reasons for that, we don't know for sure. It might be the amount, it might be just the timing, it might be the duration of supplementation was not enough. I'm not saying that it doesn't work. I'm just saying that at that level, for that length of supplementation, we didn't have any response. Okay. Now, what about the health? Again, those calves that were born from cows that received supplementation, more calves responded to the vaccine compared to the control. So here you have 56% only of the calves responded to the vaccine. So that means that 44% of those calves didn't produce any amount of antibody after receiving 2 rounds of vaccination. Just wasted $12 per calf in 44% of them. But look at here. Right, so what's the value of this? And like I told you at the beginning, it's really hard to estimate that. Now, what about this scenario? Did it pay off? Again, we had no differences on pregnancy rates. Once I account for the cost of supplementation, the extra weaning weight that we got in that study, we still made about $5. Now, is $5 per cow enough to convince you to do it? That's your decision, right? I would, because I think my opinion is always better to be conservative at this time of the year. Because let's say, for example, you run into a situation that the dry season becomes earlier or lasts longer, or it's just harder than usual. You say you have more frost during the winter time than usual. Then that extra body condition score at the time of calving, that extra half of a point, is going to save your life in the next breeding season. All right, so even though I was very conservative, you can consider you just broke even. All right, but also I'm sending calves to a feedlot producer that has better health, and think about reputation in those cases. Right? Being known for having calves that don't become as sick as other people. Now, what about the year-round supplementation? This is something that there are several ways that you can do it, right? Some people, what they do, they provide free choice access to molasses all year long. So those cows can eat as much as they can, as much as they want to. What we did was, here at ONA, usually we provide supplementation only during the winter time. It's about 600 pounds of molasses per cow per year, offered from January all the way to April. Right? So what we did, we kept the same total amount, but we spread it all throughout the year. Okay, so now those cows have access to the supplement all year. We did that because I wanted to allow them to eat the supplement for the entire year without increasing the amount of supplementation. This is just one way to do it. Other ways, like I told you, people just provide free choice, and they easily eat twice of that amount. Right? More than 1,000 pounds of molasses in a year. So the whole idea behind this year-round supplementation here is that because they have access to the supplement for the entire year, they're going to calve in better condition. And I'm improving their nutrition during the most part of the gestation. So in theory, I would help how the calves are developing, and I'm going to impact their performance as I have showed you so far. And then we added a third treatment that instead of using molasses, we added cubes, all provided year-round too. So these supplemented cubes, they were formulated to provide the same protein and energy compared to the molasses year-round. Right? But we wanted to include this treatment just because some people don't want to use liquid feed; they want to do a dry they want to use a dry supplement. Right? So, but we offered those. The whole point of the study was to look at supplement type. Okay, one dry versus liquid, it changes how fast they consume the supplement. Also, one supplement is based on sugar, the other one is based on soluble fiber. Once those supplements are consumed, the fermentation and products are totally different. And that what it does, it changes the circulation of hormones and metabolites in that count. or hormones and metabolites that are associated with energy and protein metabolism. So by changing the supplement type, are we going to also affect how those calves develop? Okay. So what we did was we did it for 2 years as well. Started the study in May, and then by November, when those cows started calving, those ones that received supplementation either from molasses or cubes, they had greater body condition score as you would expect compared to the control. Now look again, the control is losing body condition score during the last 45 days compared to the other treatments that are not losing. Right? Now look at this one here, the molasses year-round. Even though they lost more body condition after calving, they were able to maintain a higher condition all the way to the preg check compared to the control group. Now look at the cubes. Starting about 40 days before calving, they started to lose significant amount of body condition score. We did not expect that because they received the same amount of supplementation as this treatment here. So we would expect them to have the same response. What happened here is that the frequency of supplementation that we used. So molasses we offer twice weekly on Monday and Thursdays. But molasses, even though you're offering twice weekly, it takes them more than a day to consume that supplement. It might take 2.5 days to eat the whole supplement amount. With the cubes, what they were supposed to eat in 2 days, they ate in 20 minutes. So on that day, they did not, most likely they didn't graze much. So the supplement was just replacing the forage and not adding additional protein and energy to those cows. That's why they start losing condition. But even though we had those differences in condition score, again, we had no differences on pregnancy rates. And the reason is just like the one I told you at the beginning of the study, those cows get calved in, started the study in great condition, and they calved in great condition as well. And they did not lose more than half of a point. Right? Now, what about calving distribution? Just like the study one that I showed you, those cows that receive molasses cubes year-round, unfortunately, they start calving later. And this is just because they have a significant loss of body condition score after calving. Right? Now, what happened to the calf performance during the pre-weaning phase? No differences on birth weights, no differences on weaning weights. Right? This is averaged 2 years. Then we also send this series to the feedlot, and it seems that those calves that were born from cows that received supplementation during gestation, right, either molasses or year-round or cubes year-round, they also have better vaccine response, right, compared to the control group. But remember, this is just 1 year data. We're still collecting year 2 right now. What about the feedlot performance? Overall, you don't have a lot of differences on how much they ate during the feedlot period. The calves born from cows that received the cubes year-round, they gain slightly less during the growing phase. But even though they gain slightly less, when I look at the carcass quality, there's no differences in the hot carcass weight. But I do see more carcasses grading choice, less carcasses grading low choice if they were born from cows that received supplementation during gestation. Right? So again, once I collect in the year 2, I'll have all the data and I will be able to run several economical scenarios to show you if it works or not. And just to re-emphasize, this is just one way to do year-round. You can do several ways, all right? This is not the only option that people have. So these were, as you guys realize, we started in 2017. I still don't have 100% of the data yet. It takes a long time to run those studies. Okay, but they have a lot of implications for the beef industry, not only here in Florida, but also in the world. And then starting this year, we began our second series of studies, and they won't be done until 2023, actually. All right, so this year, what we looked at, we started 3 studies with fetal programming, and I showed you the study 1 that we have to supplement for the entire late gestation to have a benefit on the calf, to have the best growth from those calves, right? So now what we're trying to do is how can I supplement for the whole late gestation and at the same time reduce labor costs? So in this study, we're looking at frequency of supplementation. So we have a treatment that doesn't receive any supplementation before calving, one that is offered supplementation every day for those 12 weeks before calving, and another one is offered 3 times weekly or once a week. The amount of supplement per week is exactly the same among those 3 treatments here. I'm just reducing the number of feeding events. So what we want to show is how low can I get without impacting the performance of the mothers, and how low can I get without before impacting the performance of the calves. Is that a midterm that we can find that would allow us to reduce labor and still achieve the best results for both of them? We're also going to send those steers to the feedlot, and we're going to develop the heifers to look at puberty rate as well. So the study number 6, we're combining pre and post calving nutrition. All right, so pre-calving nutrition is the fetal programming concept that I told you. They would change the nutrition during gestation, and that can change how they're going to perform in the future. Post-calving nutrition is what we call metabolic imprinting. It's changing the nutrition of a calf during their first few months of their life. Also has implication in the future. All right, so we're trying to combine them to see, are we going to have additive effects, or will one strategy compensate for the other? So for example, will improving the nutrition after calving compensate for poor nutrition during gestation? We might have a year that the dry season becomes sooner, and unfortunately your cows calved thinner. Right? Can we boost the nutrition of those calves after calving to make sure to compensate for that poor nutrition during gestation? All right. And then this last one that we're doing is just fortification of supplements with feed additives. So for example, monensin. We're adding monensin. Monensin is used in several sectors of the industry, weaning calves, early wean calves. It works really well. What we're trying to do is that when you add to the supplement, it causes changes to their physiology, and it favors some of the hormones that are associated with fetal development and energy metabolism. And it costs about 3 to 5 cents a day. Right? But the potential for improving pre-weaning growth of those calves is huge. So the chances that it's going to pay off is really high as well. All right. So and again, like I told you, we started this year, but it's going to take a long time.